Hi everyone, my name's Titus, and today I'm going to show you some tips and tricks for creating platformer games. Whether you just like the genre or you're just starting out in game dev, platformers are a great starting point to begin your game development journey. Movement through translation is a fundamental principle of any game, and platformers will allow you to improve that skill set. Let's not waste any time and jump right into it. Alright, to demo this prototype, I'm going to be using the third-person template, so if you want to follow along, you can select that one there. Make sure your starter content is checked, give it a name, choose a location, and hit create. Alright, I generally like to start off by creating my folder structure, so we're just going to be creating 4 folders. First one I'm going to call Blender. Second one is going to be called Materials. Third one is going to be called Level Sequences. And then my fourth one is going to be Blueprints. Simple enough. Under Blender, I made a simple, I guess, hover pad, we'll call it. So I'm just going to bring that over. You can just drag that into here. And then if you've ever done any Blender work, you know that the materials don't import over. So I'm just going to set that to do not create or do not import textures. And then import. That way I just need my static mesh. There we go. And then I'm also going to bring in the, I went ahead and baked the color and the roughness so we can make it look a little decent. Alright, pretty straightforward there. Now that we got the material imported, or the static mesh, let's work on some of our actual materials. The first material we'll make will be our M underscore hover pad. You can call it whatever. And then this one is pretty straightforward. I'm just going to go into Blender, and then I'm going to drag out my color and my roughness map. And that one is my roughness. This one is my color. The way you can tell is right here, the name. I'm just going to plug in my RGB into my base color, and then my RGB for my roughness into my roughness. And then I can save that. And now we can work on the next texture, which is going to be our engine color. So I'll create a material, call it M underscore E base. That's going to be for emission. I'm going to change the blend mode from opaque to translucent. And then I could just hold 3, click in the screen to add a vector 3 constant. I can hold M, click in the screen to add a multiply node. Then I can hold 1, click in the screen to add a 1 vector constant. I'm going to hook these up just like this. And then I can right click on the color, convert to a parameter, and just call it color. Right click on the vector 1, convert to a parameter. I'm just going to call it brightness. You can call it intensity, brightness, whatever you want. I'm going to set my default value for brightness at 100. And then I'm going to save my emission base just like that. The reason I created a base material is because if we wanted to try out multiple colors, it's very easy. You can just right click and create a material instance, call it MI underscore, and then you can pick whatever colors you want. So maybe we do green. Repeat those steps. We can maybe do blue. And then repeat once more. And we'll call it red. And then if you double click any of these, you can choose color brightness. This one is blue, so let's pick a blue color. Yeah, somewhere around there. And then the next one is green. Let's pick a green color. And last but not least, we got red. Let's pick like a reddish orange color. Alright, I think we're looking pretty good now. So we got our materials set up. I'm going to go ahead and close out because I don't think I'm going to need to go back into those for a bit. And now that we have our material and our static mesh set up, let's maybe create a blueprint and let's get a platform moving around. So we can go to our blueprints folder, right click, create a new blueprint class. I'm going to choose type actor, call it BP underscore, maybe hoverpad. And then we got our blueprint here. It doesn't really have anything in it. So what you can do is press Control Spacebar. You can actually select the static mesh. If you didn't make one from Blender or you didn't import one from an asset store, you can just add maybe a cylinder and compress the cylinder on the Z-axis so it makes it like a pancake, and then that'll work just fine too. I'm going to hit the add button and then add static mesh, and it'll automatically reference my hover path. This particular material has, or this mesh has 2 material slots. For the first slot, I'm going to call it M underscore hoverpad. The only reason I know that is because I made that in Blender, and that is how I assigned it. For the second material slot, I did that as the engine base, which is basically kind of like some accent pieces there. And this is where you can do the MI underscore, maybe do red. And now we have some engines and a little bit of an accent. Alright, so now we can save our blueprint. It's just a static mesh, nothing fancy. And let's actually set it in the scene. So if we wanted to, we can just drag it out. And then you have it right there. So now you'll notice if you try to run into this particular mesh, and you might notice this on stuff you import from the asset store or stuff you make, usually that is because of the collision mesh is a little bit complex. So what you can do is go to your actual static mesh, open it up. If you show simple collision, you can see this is a very odd collision shape. I can just go to collision, remove it, go back to collision, and add a simple box collision. Save that. It'll automatically apply to any of the objects that use it, and now you have a nice smooth transition there. So perfect, we got our actual static mesh in the scene. Now let's actually move it. We're making a platformer, right? So there's a bunch of ways to do it. The most common that I've seen is the level sequencer, but I will also show you some better ways that scale a little bit better with that. But we can go up here to the level sequencer, and we'll add a level sequence. I'm going to drop it in my level sequences folder. I'm going to title this just level 1. Now this brings up basically a timeline. What you can do is you can add objects in your timeline, and then you can modify a parameter such as transform or what have you. So we'll hit track, actor to sequence. I'm going to choose my blueprint hover pad that I made. And then I have to choose a component, so I'll hit this, and I'm going to do the transform. And then if I wanted, I can just hit this little plus sign. It'll add a keyframe in. This is 30 frames per second, so at 30 that's 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, and so on. I'm just going to go at 150. I'm going to do the same keyframe. I'll cut that in half at 75. I'll grab my mesh, drag it up, and then I can just add keyframe. You can also enable the keyframe option here, so when you just move it, it'll automatically put it in for you. Now when we scrub through the timeline, you'll see it works. One other thing you'll want to do is you will probably want to loop this. So the loop option is right down here, and then you can hit play. And you have your first platformer. So now if we play our game, this object will actually move around, and then we can use it to actually get around the map. So pretty straightforward. The issue with it is it's fine by itself, but if you were making a game with multiple levels that has maybe a dozen or more objects in it, and they all need to adjust transforms, This doesn't scale too well. So I'm going to show you another option on how you can maybe do this a little bit easier. So I'm going to close out the sequencer. I'm going to go to our blueprints folder and create a new blueprint class, type actor, BP underscore, and we'll call this hover new, or whatever you want to name it. And then what we can do is go into this, and we are going to add an empty static mesh. So we'll hit add static mesh, and I am literally going to call it empty mesh. You can call it whatever you want, but this is, we're basically going to create the static mesh from the construction script. So we'll kind of like do it kind of like in real time, I guess. We'll go back into construction here. And then what we can do is drag off, set static mesh, and then for the new mesh, we can actually right click, promote this to a variable, and we'll call that maybe the hover pad mesh. Now, if you remember, our hover pad has 2 material slots. So if we drag out here and we do set material, we'll want to duplicate that, so we can press Control D, and then we'll change the element index to 1, and this is referencing element 0 here and element 1 here. So element 0 is going to be the main color, and element 1 will be the engine color, like so. For this material, I can just do m underscore hover pad. But if I want to get a little tricky with the engine, I can actually right click on that one, do promote to variable, and we can call that maybe engine color. Oops. And then I'm going to drag that over here. Kind of keep this as organized as I can. Now for the engine color, I'm going to expose that in the editor. You can do that a few ways. Just check instant editable, or you can click the little eyeball right there. And then for the actual target, it's going to be our empty mesh. So we can just drag off here, create a little reroute node here, and then we'll drag off this one, and then I will create, oops, I can select it, there we go. All right, now let's try that compile again. Okay, so now our empty mesh is basically adding materials into our hover pad mesh. Make sure I got that right. Target, new mesh. Yeah, should be. Okay. Now the issue is if we go to the viewport, we don't see it. And that's because if we go to our hover pad mesh, there isn't anything set. So we got to do our hover pad static mesh that we brought in from Blender or whatever you're using. And if you compile, you should now see our object. So we're getting there. Now the engine color is not going to be set up because we have to actually set that up in the editor directly. We're basically exposing that variable. To actually do the movement though, we're going to be using a movement component called interp to movement, which is interpolation to movement. And then what you can do is you can actually drag this into your construction script and get a reference to it. And there's some pretty interesting settings here. If we select on it, some of the things we're going to be messing with is the duration. We're going to be messing with the control points. And then we're also going to be messing with the behavior type. So you notice we can do like one shot, or we can ping pong, loop reset. That was kind of like the the sequencer when we were looping the animation or looping the sequence. Ping pong will basically kind of go back and forth, so it's kind of like the same thing. And then basically exposing these to the editor makes it so we can set these up on, you know, each platformer, so each mover object basically. So the way we do that is we drag it into the editor, and then you pull off it, and then you can actually search for all those settings you see on the right there. So the first one was like behavior type, right? So set behavior type. So we got that one. The next one was the duration, so we can do set duration, like so. And then the last one was the control points. So set control points. You notice that's the weird looking one, that's an array. And then what we can do is add some reroute nodes here. Organize everything. And maybe I'll bump this back. Select these, press Q. Oops. I guess that's not aligning, I don't know why. Q, oh, there we go. I have to select something. Okay. Now, instead of hooking everything up, what we're gonna do instead is on the left-hand side of each node, you can right-click and promote it to a variable. For this variable name, I'm gonna leave it at behavior type. I'm actually okay with that name. And I'll drag it up here. For the duration, promote to a variable. I'm okay with the name duration. So I'll just drag it up over here. And then control points, promote to a variable. And I'm actually okay with control points as a name, so I'll drag it up here. And now we can just drag these little pins all the way through. Compile and save. And one other thing we want to do before we forget is I want to make the behavior type, duration, and control points editable from the main screen. So I'm just going to click on the little eyeball, compile and save. Now if I go back, and all we have to do is add in our new hover pad, which is this one. You'll notice it doesn't have any color, and you'll also notice that it doesn't move. So what we can do is when you click on it, on the right hand side, you're going to have access to those values. The first one was engine color, so maybe I can do mi_green. So now it's a green pad. The behavior type, I'm going to do ping pong. The duration, I'll do it over 5 seconds. And then for the control points, and this is the best part of the this setup, is you can hit the little plus sign, and you can add an array of location tags, basically. So I'll add 2. I have them set as relative positions. So basically 0, 0, 0 means it's wherever you leave it in the level. And the second one, let's say I bump it up to 200. And now what's nice about this is you can actually just click on that little diamond, and you can literally just drag it like any other game object, and it'll automatically update your transform position of where you want it to go. And that is a very nice to have, because you're not, it takes the guesswork out. Like you don't have to like say like you're trying to line up a bunch of things, like am I at 200 on the Z and 350 on the X, you know, rather than mess with that, you can just literally move a diamond shaped object in the world, and then wherever you place it is where it's going to go. And if you want it to move faster or slower, well, that's the duration. So we can set the duration to 2 seconds instead of 4. And now your pad moves a little bit quicker. And now the setup for that was actually a lot longer than using a sequence, right? But where you save your time is at scale. So kind of like I was saying before, it's fine if you only have to do it like once, it's probably not a big deal. But if you had like, say you're doing like 10 levels and each level has like a dozen or more platformers or movers, just dragging out, just doing a little bit extra setup on initially, and then you can drag out, your objects. You just select it, and then you can set all sorts of references and values where you want it. So like ping pong, 3 seconds, add a couple elements here, and then what you do is you can just drag it wherever you want it to go, and then you're off to the races. That's where you actually save your time, and it's much easier for you to prototype and actually build out your game, especially if you're doing a lot of platforming. But let's take it a step further. Let's actually build this out even more. So let's go into the new hover pad here, and we can actually come off our code into a for each loop. We can plug in the array element here, and then we can do add static mesh component. You'll have to break or split the array element, so right click split structure pin, and then on the relative transform you right click split that pin as well. You'll have access to the transform location. You can just plug it in direct. And then off the static mesh component, you can drag and do set static mesh, return value into the target, and then the mesh you want to use, if you remember, is going to be our hover pad mesh variable that we set earlier. So we can just drag that out, do a get, plug it in, and then it's going to reference basically this little static mesh. Now it's not going to set a material, so what you do is what we did kind of earlier on, and with this particular model I have to do it twice because remember I have 2 material slots for this particular model. So we'll just do set material, and then I can just Control D to duplicate it. On the first material it's index 0, on the second one it's index 1. Plug these in there. I need a target. The target is actually the return value of the control point. That's what I was looking for. So the return value of the control point's location basically. So I can just drag off here, plug that in there, and then I can add a couple reroute nodes. Organize this just a smidge better. Like so. Now if you notice, we haven't actually set the material yet. So let's actually get a little creative with that. So let's go back here under our material slot, or our folder I should say. We can right click and we'll do a new material. Let's call it M underscore holographic. Double click into here. I'm going to set the blend mode to translucent. I'm going to do a vector 3 constant, so just hold 3, click. And then I can use I guess a Fresnel. So let's do FRE. So Fresnel right here. I can come into a multiplier node, so hold M, click on the graph, plug that in there. And then I can use a sine node. Now if I use sine, sine is -1 to 1. So I'm going to do sine remapped, which is 0 to 1. Plug that in here. And then I can come off the sine phase. It's not going to move unless I add time. And then I just need a single constant vector, so I can just hold 1, click in here, get a value. I like 5, I think is good. You can play with the value. This is going to be how, I guess, thick the lines are for the hologram. Plug that into value 1. And I'm going to plug this into opacity. So you got this sort of beating heart. If this is too fast, you can also hold D, get a divide node, and just plug time into there, and then divide it over some value. But I kind of like the fast beat, so I'm going to leave that alone. And then thickness, you can play, with whatever you prefer. That's kind of what 1 looks like. 2 is pretty good too, I think. That's 3. What's 100 look like? I mean, you can get really weird with it, I guess. 25. Yeah, let's try 25. Let's see how weird that looks. And then if you want the color to change, you can just add whatever color you want. Maybe we do something weird like pink. Plug that in there. Yeah, I liked it better when it was black. Alright, so I'm not going to keep 25. I'm going to just do 5. There we go. And then I'm going to save this. And now under my new hover pad, the material will use the M underscore holographic for both of them. And then compile and save. Now the other thing is, there's going to be an issue with this, but you can kind of see the effect already. Is it shows you where the pad is going to end up. That could be useful for a number of reasons. Mainly when you're building out your levels, it's easier to line things up. But also if you wanted to expose that to the player, it might help them plan their routes or what have you. So there's actually a lot of use cases for it. The issue is going to be when we play, it's a static mesh, so it's not only going to have a collision component to it, so we don't want that, but it also shows in game, so you may not want that. Easy enough. When we go to the hover pad, we're controlling all that through this little node here, so the add static mesh component. We can just simply search for collision and turn collision to no collision. Don't confuse this for the actual teleporter either, right? So this is set to no collision, but if we go to the empty mesh blocks all. So the player will still be able to stand on it, which I'll demonstrate here in a second. But no collision for this one. And then the other thing you'd want to do is hidden in game. You'll want to check that, but make it visible so we can see it. And with those minor changes, you can actually see the outline, but when you play in game, it's gone. All right. Now just to show how useful that can be, let's add in one other blueprint here. Like say we added our hover pad right here. And then for our engine color, let's do mi underscore red. I'm gonna do ping pong. Duration, I'll do 6 seconds. And then I'm gonna add 5 elements. So first element I'll leave alone, or I guess the 0 element, which is number 1 in my mind, I guess. This one I'm just gonna bump up a bit. That'll let me see it. So now I can just come in my editor, easy peasy, grab it, move it where I want it, and then maybe I'm good with that control point. So I can collapse that, move into my next control point, and then I can pull it up over here, and this is going to be the 3rd place it goes. So I can easily just grab my direction. Maybe the thing comes over here, like so. And maybe I'm happy with that. Maybe I make it go a little bit higher. And then for index number 3, can grab that. And maybe this one comes over here and goes a little bit lower. Maybe I'll actually skim the ground a bit. That'll be kind of fun. And then for the last one, I can then grab this over. Whoops. And then maybe come over here. You can see this is very helpful, just being able to see, you know, where it's going, the path it's taking. If I were to do this the other way through a sequencer, I'd be there, you know, for a while, trying to plan everything out, get it set up, and then, you know, depending on if you have to do this multiple times, across multiple levels, this is, you know, a lot easier. And then there the pad goes. It goes really quick. I am probably not going to time this correctly. No way. Yeah, way too fast. Although I bet you I can get on it over here. Nope, I missed it. There we go. Alright, good people. This concludes the Platformers tutorial video, but I hope you found some informative value that you can bring into your own projects. But as always, thanks for watching, consider subscribing, and see you on the next one.